Docker file. And uh, and so we looked at your user instructions. So by default, your whenever you are giving the instructions in a Docker file, it gets executed as a root user by default. Now if you want to run the instructions as a different user, you can make use of the user instruction to set the user, which user you want to use to run the instructions. We can set the user by making use of the user instruction. Then we looked at your work dir. So work dir can be used when you want to set the working directory. So again, by default, whenever you're executing the instructions, this instruction gets executed in the root directory by default. Now, if you want the instructions to be executed in a particular path, you can make use of your work dir to set your working directory. Post that, we also looked at your arg instruction. Or arg is another way for us to set your variable. So you have your env instruction, and then we also have your arg instruction. Now the difference between them is that your arg instruction gets arg instruction is used to set your dynamic variables, and your env instruction is used to set your static variables. So the variable name and the variable value will be inside the Docker file, whereas with your arg instruction, you can define the variable, but then the value you can pass it with your build instruction. So you can change it whenever you want it. But with your env instruction, you'll have to modify the Docker file. In case you want to change the value, you will need to modify the Docker file. Only then you can change it. Okay. Post that, we also looked at your health check. Now, health check, see, by default, let's say you have an application running inside the container. Now, the container will be up and running, but that does not mean that your application inside the container is working as expected. Now, if you want to validate, you want to make sure that your application inside the container is working as expected, we can make use of your health check for that. So health checks, these are useful to kind of validate whether the application inside the container is working as expected or not. Right. So these are some of the instructions that we commonly use when we talk about your Docker file. And then post that, we started off with your Docker Compose. Now, what is Docker Compose? Docker Compose is whenever you want to run multiple containers. So using one single command, if you want to start multiple containers, we can make use of your Docker Compose for that. So Docker Compose is a tool which helps us to run multiple containers. So this can be useful when you have a web application and a backend like a database, and you want these to be running together. You can make use of your Docker Compose for that. So yesterday we looked at your installation. I showed you how you can install your Docker Compose, and that is where we have stopped. So any questions, any queries with anything? All clear?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So now what we will do is we will look at some examples for this, right? Give me one moment. Let me share the screen. Just I'm sharing my screen. So now what we will do is we will, So like I said, your Docker Compose, it's mainly used when you want to, have a web application running. Okay. So whenever you want to run any web application, now see, generally when we talk about your web application, you will have a front end and you'll have a back end. Front end will be the user interface, and then the back end would be like, a database where you'll be storing the data. So like this, when you want to run multiple containers, hey, when you want to run multiple containers, we can make use of your Docker Compose for that. So here I have an example which is for your WordPress. Now WordPress is an application, all right? It's a UI based application. Now for this you need to have a database as well. So we have two things running over here. Now with your Docker Compose, we will be creating a YAML file. So all the instructions related to your Docker Compose, we pass that in a YAML file, .yml file. Now, YAML file is like your JSON, like how we have your JSON, which is your data serialization language. Similar to that, we have your YAML, which is also a data serialization language for us. Okay, so most of the tools that we use today, like your Docker, Kubernetes, Ansible, you have GitLab, most of the tools, it makes use of this YAML to give the instructions to write the script. So in case of your Docker Compose also, we make use of the YAML instructions to define what we need as part of your Docker Compose. Now again, to begin with this, you will need to create a file with the name docker-compose.yml. So you have to make sure that you're following that naming convention. Okay, same as the Docker file where we followed the naming convention with your Docker Compose. Also, you will need to follow the naming convention. So you'll need to create this file. So once you have the file, you can start writing the instructions in these in this file. Okay, let me go here. So here we start writing the instructions. Now, this is the instruction we are going to look at. So first we are defining the version. Now, version is basically used to tell, so based on the versions, your instructions, all these instructions that we are passing over here, these instructions will be used. Okay, give me one moment. Sorry. Yeah, so your version is to use to specify the instructions that you want to use. Okay, so we start off with specifying which version you want to use, and then we start off with your services. Now, what is services? Services is simply your container. So multiple containers together, we call it as your services. Okay, so it's a syntax, it's a way, it's a block. Okay, you can think of it as a block that we are defining. Okay, so here I can say services, and then within this block, so let me change this to YAML so it would be easier. Okay, so services, and within this block we start defining the containers that we want. So here I've defined two containers. So one is for the database and one is for the WordPress. So WordPress is the UI, the front end, and DB is the backend for us. Okay, so here we are creating two containers. So one is the DB and the other is the WordPress. Now, hey, sorry, just give me one moment. Sorry guys. Yeah, so we are defining two containers over here. So this is user defined. You can give whatever you want. In our case, I'm calling this as the DB, or if you want you want to call this as a database, you can call it. That's up to you. Okay. And then again within this, we start giving the details about the container that you want to run as part of your database. So first we're defining the image. So which image we want to use. So I want to use the MySQL version 5.7. Then we are defining the volume. So I want to make my data persistent. So I'm defining that. Then I'm using this flag called restart is set to always. Now what this will do is, this is used to tell my Docker that if this container, whatever the container I'm creating here, if this goes down, sorry guys, if this container goes down for any reason, restart it automatically. So restart is set to always. And then I'm defining some environment variables over here. So this is related to the containers. I'm setting it a root password. So if you want to connect to the database, the container database, I can use this password. This is the database I'm creating inside the container. That's the user, and that's the user password. So this is the root user password, and this is the non-root user that I'm creating. Like this, if you want to give more instructions, you can give, but this becomes one container for me. Likewise, for this, we are giving the instructions. So again, I'm defining the image, which image I want to use, and then I'm defining a dependency over here. So here I'm giving this depends on instruction. So what I'm telling here is, before this container gets created, make sure all the dependencies is created. So in my case, this will be the dependency. So I basically, what we are telling here is, before you start running this container, make sure the database container is up and running. Okay, because my WordPress needs the database to be running, so I'm creating a dependency over here. Then again, we are specifying the port number, but because this is a web application, we'll need to have the port number. On what port number you want to run this? So we are doing the port mapping. Then again, we have restart set to always. So for any reason, if the container goes down, restart it automatically, and then I'm defining some environment variables over here. Okay, so like I said, this particular container needs a database. So here I'm giving the host. So what is the database? So I'm telling connect to this particular container, which is defined here, and connect to it on port 3306, because this is a MySQL. MySQL runs on port 3306. Then connect as user WordPress. So here if you see, we have created the user. Use this password, and this is the database. So I'm telling my WordPress container that you can connect to this database, and these are the details of the database. Does this make sense? Any questions, guys?
Understood, Ravi. Hello.
Sorry, guys. Yeah. So like this, if you want to define like multiple containers, okay. So here, like you can say like container one, and then again you can have your container two, you can have your container three. So that's totally up to you. How many containers you want. And then when we start this, when I execute this, all the containers that I have defined here will start execute, will be created for us in one single shot. So that's the point of a Docker Compose. If you want to run multiple containers, we can make use of a Docker Compose for that. So this can be especially useful when you have an application running. If you want to have an application running, you can make use of your Docker Compose for that. Okay. So give me 1 minute. And the last thing I have here is your volume. So we also need to create an instance for the volume. Any persistence data that you're creating, we will need to create a instance for the volume as well. So here goes my volume. So this becomes the instruction. I'll take this instruction. I'll go to my Docker Compose file. Let me, yeah, it's okay. Cancel this. And here I will give the instruction. So this becomes the instructions for me. And then using one single command, which would be docker-compose up. So when I run this command, what this will do is this will look for that file, the YAML file, and it will start executing that. So whatever the instructions, okay, now this is throwing me an error on line number 12. So let me look at that. So we'll start. Right. The YAML file, the indentations are very important. Okay, if you don't give the indentations properly, then your YAML syntax validation will fail. So you can see this indentation. So there was a problem with the indentation. That is what it was complaining about. DB data is not allowed. DB additional property. DB data it's complaining about my DB underscore data. Okay, so this is complaining about this. So let me comment this. Let me find volume. Sorry, it should be over here. So again, indentations problem. We have to make sure we're using the right indentations. Now you can see this has started the container. Now, first it is essentially downloading the image for us. All right. So this is the WordPress image that we have defined, and this is the database image that we have defined. Now, once the image is available, remember we have said that you have to make sure you know the database container needs to be running first. So what will happen here is my Docker Compose will make sure that the database container will be created first, and then the okay, no space left. Let me clean something. So Docker. Okay, so give me one moment. There's no space. Okay, so you see which image is not being used. So I don't have this one, so I can delete that. I'm just trying to free up some space, so just give me a moment. Am I using this? I am using that also. So I don't have 4.0. Yes. Okay. This one. Okay, so now let me try. This one. Waiting for this to be completed. Okay, so here now this is basically the container up and running. So here you can see there is the database we have, and we also have the WordPress. So essentially, if you see what it did was it first started the database container for us because we have created the depends on, right? So depends on will make sure my WordPress container is running first. Now this is always in foreground mode. When I say foreground mode, if you run this Docker Compose up command, your terminal will be logged. You won't be able to work with it. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to use this ampersand symbol, which will push this process in the background. So your terminal will not be logged, and we should be able to use our terminal as well. So now here I should be able to see two containers. So here, if you see, this is my WordPress container, and here is the MySQL container. So both the containers are created for me. So again, Docker Compose, the whole point of your Docker Compose is to start multiple containers at the same time. So using one single command, we can start any number of containers you want. You can do that. So that's where we make use of your Docker Compose. Now,
Ravi, yeah, one quick question. So, like, how do we
yeah,
get to know, like, this is running on which container?
yeah, I will talk about that. So here we have this command called so meaning your WordPress is running where and your MySQL is running where, or which containers did we start by using Docker Compose? Is that your question?
Yeah, because Docker Composer is used to manage multiple containers, right? So, like,
Yes,
when we
yes.
create the YAML file, like, how do I get to know, like, which, I mean, it is using the which container. So that was my question.
No, I mean, see, these are all your containers. All these containers are up and running. Now, if you want to know which containers are managed by Docker Compose, okay,
Okay.
you can use this command, docker-compose
Compose.
ps. This will only show the containers which are managed by Docker Compose.
Okay, got
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Now, the other containers, these are manually created. We had created it one by one. Now, if you want to see only the containers which are managed by Docker Compose, then we can use this docker-compose ps.
Yes. Okay, got it.
Okay, so we have two containers here. So we have the database container and we have the WordPress container. And again, if you want to connect with this, you can go ahead and connect it. But for now, let's say we will hit that. Okay, so let me take the IP of this. Uh, let me. I have to connect. Give me 1 minute. But essentially now, if we hit that IP, I should be able to see the application. So this will be the server, and we have done the mapping on port 8080. So here you can see we have done the 8080 mapping. So we will hit this on 8080, and this will take us to the application. Okay, whatever the application that we have defined. So this is the setup. So this is basically a WordPress. So continue, give it a name, give a username. So this is basically the admin setup that we are doing. We will set the email address and click on install WordPress, right? So basically the setup that we are doing here. So login, and we'll give the username and password that we have set up, and we should be able to log into the WordPress application. So this is the WordPress application that we have, and you should be able to see all the logs. So you can see this is all the logs. So whenever I'm doing an operation over here, it is generating a log for me. So let me show this once again. So let's I'll go to the home page. So here you can see there is a request. Right. So that's the application. Now, uh, whatever you will do here, right? Let's say for example the database thing, all the data we are storing it in this database. So you can connect to this database if you want. So Docker, I need the container ID. So this will be the container ID. So Docker exec and then bin bash. So now I'm inside the database. Okay, and then we can connect to this MySQL root user, and then or I can also connect it as a WordPress user, and I'm connected to the database. So this one, remember the compose file, we had set the username and password. That is what I'm using, right? So now I can say show databases. So there's the database. So use WordPress and then show tables. All these are the tables related to my WordPress. And if you look at this user, select star from WP users. So this is the user. So you can see user registered. This is the user I have created. So whatever I will do here in this application will be stored in this data. So like this, if you want to have a front end and a back end running together, we can make use of your Docker Compose. Questions?
No, Ravi, got it.
So I'll stop here. I have a meeting now. So there's a little bit on more your Docker Compose. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But yeah, thanks for today, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Ravi. Take care.
Okay, bye.